Hello, hello. This is Galen Bingham with the Leadership Toolbox. And I am just really, really excited to have this conversation for a couple of reasons. Number one, the guy sitting this right next to me is a longtime friend of mine and one of the best leaders I've ever come in contact with. I had the opportunity to meet Tom Etling, was about 4 or 5 years ago now.
Yeah, it's actually probably been more than that. Right?
And we were working, I was part of a board, nonprofit board, and we were looking for a leader to come and take the organization to the next level. Had a great foundation. We were doing some really, really good things with the nonprofit organization. But as we were looking to the future, we were needing different skills. And Tom was the guy that we were able to convince to leave his highly profitable for-profit organization and come and work with us. Did a phenomenal job, and now he's doing other great things. So when I start thinking about leaders that I can go to get ideas and suggestions on how to be effective as a leader, Tom was actually one of the first people that I thought of. So with that, Tom, share a little bit about who you are, your background, and how we came to sit next to each other here on this couch.
Sure. So I'm a native St. Louisan, but most people think I've been here my entire life, which I haven't been. So I've lived in Seattle and San Francisco and Columbia, South Carolina, and Madison, Wisconsin. Went to school in Bloomington, Indiana at IU. But my career has been really a mix of a lot of different roles, from marketing communications to management consulting to the operations, which has been kind of the key, I guess, probably my undiagnosed short attention span. It really helps me to have, I'm a pretty quick study. So I've worked in a lot of different industries. I worked for Bob Barrett at Bi-State Development when they were dealing with real issues relating to the cut in transit services back in 2010. We started working together, and I feel the same way about you. You were kind of a really, really critical part of us taking that organization at St. Patrick Center and making it all that it can be. And then I went to retired from St. Patrick Center, went to run a marketing communications firm, and now I'm doing management consulting for a number of organizations, including a Paradigm, which is a 23-year-old brand firm, and we're sitting in their space today. So really great folks who have really helped big organizations like Panera and Purina, and also small organizations, really kind of tell their stories better and authentically kind of create connections with their customers. So it's been a fun and great ride, and I will continue to do it, God willing.
Fantastic. So let's get into the conversation. Before we go deep into kind of a leadership philosophy, let's go back. Before starting your professional career, before doing any of the amazing things that you just shared, are there some childhood experiences that you can point to and say that was maybe your first introduction to leadership, or what this leadership responsibility is? What was growing up like?
Yeah, there were a few. One was I had a buddy in grade school who got bullied a lot. So I used to get in maybe not quite fights, but in disagreements with guys that were older that would pick on this kid. So the first thing I always had a passion to do was help people, and people in a business, people in your community, people in your church that were vulnerable or had vulnerabilities. We all have vulnerabilities, but the worst kind of folks are the folks that kind of prey off of people who have those vulnerabilities, which is why we have such a common interest in organizations like St. Patrick Center. So that was a big moment in my life. Another one was when I was a junior at St. Louis University High School. I was sent down to a Jesuit. My senior service project was a Jesuit mission down in Belize, and walked into a room, and this is where I was going to sleep for the next 6 weeks. And you couldn't see, the walls were entirely black because they were just covered with bugs from head to toe. And me, a little kid from St. Louis, kind of was taken aback. Well, the woman who was my host just pulled out a can of spray, sprayed the walls down, and it was like, okay, solve the issue and move forward. And it really taught me a couple things. One, when I say first world problems all the time, I remember that day. And also just, you're going to deal with adversity every day, big and small. So the ability of a leader to understand and take care of the little things every day, and then handle the big things kind of in a methodical way, and then replicate kind of some of those learnings over time, are things that I've been able to kind of produce, and has maybe added to whatever level of success I've had in my career.
Gotcha. So the time in Belize, usually people think of that as being vacation, sunshine,
right.
but
Not 35 years ago wasn't. 30 years ago wasn't. Today it's a little different than it was back then. But
gotcha.
It was. I taught at a Jesuit school down there.
Oh my, oh my. So how important would you say traveling is? Because that sounds like that gave you a different perspective than what you were enjoying here in St. Louis at the time. How important is perspective and traveling in different cultures in being a leader, would you say?
I think it's critical. I think you've been in St. Louis for 12 or 13 years, and you've traveled all over the world, and I've lived in other places, but communities, especially like this region, and I know our audience is not just in St. Louis, but you tend to listen and start thinking your certain things just based on lack of outside perspective, or you think what's going on the outside is so radically better. And we always look at Chicago and Nashville and these cities, and then instead of realizing what our real assets are, just like a brand, what really are we known for? What can we build off of and not have to be all things to all people, right? And not try to be something you're not. It doesn't mean we shouldn't be aspirational, but just I think travel and exposure to different people and diverse cultures and backgrounds really helps you understand yourself better, other people better, and then kind of craft what kind of your story is and what your pursuits may be.
Right, right. Perfect. You know, one of the things that I am often reminded of is that none of us like to have failures. None of us like to have heartaches and hard times. But when I think back to the things that have formed me and challenged me and grown me the most, it wasn't the success. Yep. It was the time that I went down this path. I thought it was the right thing to do. And boy, was I mistaken. Yep. Have there been times when, things didn't go quite the way you had hoped or had designed, and you wish you didn't have to go through that,
right?
But boy, now you're kind of glad you did from a leadership perspective.
Yeah. So other than getting cut from several teams in school, I mean, that guy, and we don't have enough time to talk about all those things. I never had any major lows professionally, but I learned a lot along the way. I'll tell you, my biggest low was personally, and as you know, that was the story of why I came to run St. Patrick's Center. My father, who was my best friend in the world, was diagnosed with a glioblastoma at age 57. And he was my best friend in the world. And I was 27 at the time. And suddenly your dad's given 3 months to live. So what I learned from that was not in the diagnosis as much as in what he did the next 2.5 years. At the time, this is 18 years ago, he beat it was white paper material in terms of him surviving with that disease and thriving and really fulfilling the last couple of years of his life on this earth. Now, do I wish my father was still here? Absolutely. But he taught me more in his sickness. And since he passed, actually, than he did a lot of years during my life, just how to embrace the opportunity. Make sure you tell people you care about them, you love them. And these things apply to professional workplace as much as they apply a lot of times to families. So, and also really appreciating the moment and being present, which is something I've always struggled with. If you ask me what my biggest shortfall is, it's really being present. So that's one of the things I'm really working on, is really making sure I'm authentically listening and then and being present in the moment versus always I'm kind of a planner and thinking what's the next thing I have to do or the next opportunity. So being present is one that I struggle with, but I'm working on.
Got it. So I want to get to your one or two suggestions for leaders to have in their toolbox, but before we get to that, I want to dig a little deeper into what you're saying about being present, because one of the things that I hear a lot, it's kind of a buzz concept, is this idea of work-life balance.
Yep.
And we talked a little bit about compartmentalizing. That's another buzzword that you hear at the highest levels of leadership. I believe that work-life balance is not what everyone thinks that it is. It's not saying, okay, I'm only going to think about my family here, and I'm only going to think about work here, and I'm only going to think about church or my religious commitment over here. But for me, it's about, can I be present wherever I am? If I'm with my family and I'm thinking about work,
absolutely,
then I'm out of balance. If I'm at church and I'm thinking about my family and a holiday commitment that I failed, then I'm out of balance. What's your take on compartmentalizing and or work-life balance?
So my mantra is always, you got to add value, and you add value in everything big and small that you're doing. So if I'm in church and my mind's wandering about another issue I have to deal with, that's okay, as long as I kind of refocus and I'm adding the value to that experience that I need. If I'm at the dinner table with my family and I've got something else on my mind, I can maybe give you 80 to 90% at the table, but as long as I'm really adding value to those experiences, I have real trouble with work-life balance, which is why I got out of public life. Because as we've talked about, being a perfectionist and a pleaser are difficult things to handle together, especially in public space. So, if I have a board of 29 people or 30 people and 29 think we're going in a great direction, one doesn't, I focus on the one, right? So that's a challenge that I have that I work really hard on. But being all things to all people, you don't need to be all things to all people. And that's something that is it's easy to say, but tough in your daily life to live out, especially if you're a pleaser. So for me, it's about being present. It's about knowing I'm always going to work extremely hard, but then finding those areas to really try to unplug, which I never used to do.
Right.
So even on vacation, put the phone away for the morning, right? And that's, for me, those are big victories. Put it away for 4 hours.
Yeah.
So, nothing. I'm not the life. My world's not going to change in 4 hours, right?
We're in such an instant world right now.
Right.
Oh my. Okay. All right. So, what are one or two things that you would say that a leader, whether you're a developing leader, whether you're a senior executive, that you would have to have or need to have in your toolbox? What are one or two things that you go to and you really rely on as a leader?
So probably three. Consistency is number one. I mean, I think there's just a complete lack of consistency in most of the organizations that I see that we compete against, that even I work in sometimes. So the consistency in showing up every day and adding value is something that's critical. And always working with integrity, I think, is something that everybody says, but not the majority of people don't really do. And really,
integrity is usually there when it's easy.
Yep. Right. And it goes also along with authenticity. For me, authenticity is, and you talk about authenticity a lot, from a leadership perspective, is critical. Understanding how you can connect with people, how you can really authentically understand how to move an issue or an organization forward. But authenticity is the key, whether it's an individual reputation or a brand's reputation or a community, like we talked about with St. Louis.
Right.
Everyone's got some differentiators, right? So how do you take those, grow those,
right?
Understand, a city or a company, we're not good at everything, but what do we do really well? How do you build on those things? How do you create environments where people really are inspired and want to come be a part of it? So I've had whatever I've been able to accomplish. It's kind of that. Those are the backbones. I also think you got to do your research and put in your time.
Right.
So, when we
there's
work
no
together,
avoiding it.
There's no avoiding it. And you can't talk about something you don't understand. You can do it to a certain extent, but to really understand, I mean, you'll remember back at St. Patrick's Center, we had 30 programs at the time. So what do you do when you start? You go in and you meet all 170 employees, not just in a conference room. You go interview them, talk to them. It's not an audit for audit's sake.
Right.
It's an understanding of what people do and how those things roll up to create an effective organization. And then it allows you to really understand how to structure an operation in a way to put people in their best places to succeed.
Yeah, you can't help if you don't understand.
Right, exactly. You can talk about it, but the second conversation might be difficult, right?
We I often talk about, if I go to a doctor and I go into the doctor's office and he says, "Hey, glad you're here.
Right.
Let's go ahead and get you prepped for surgery, and I'm going to start cutting you." You're going to think, that's malpractice. What are you doing? You don't even know what's wrong.
Right.
But we as leaders, we do that all the time. And I usually say, thank God I'm here, because I'm here to save the world. I don't even know what the problem is.
Yeah.
So,
another thing too I talk about is there's no heroes in the world. There's no martyrs these days, in my opinion. So you just really got to figure out, again, consistency wins the day. Now, innovation and technology and all those things are critical, but at the end of the day, you got to get your lunchbox packed every day, go to work, add value, and just leave something better than when you left it. Right. And also, one more thing I'll tell you is the quality of authentic partnerships is critical. And so everyone uses that word all the time, but I've been able to really understand with partnerships, like with my kids, I call them bank accounts. You have to invest in them before you pull out of them. And so you can't go into a new relationship and then start asking for things. So how do you invest and make someone's life better, or allow them to see an opportunity without, calling you and asking you for something right away? I think that's a critical thing that not many organizations do really well. And then think creatively about how all of these things work together to move an issue or an organization forward.
Gotcha. Anything you're reading right now? What are some of your favorite books or books that you might pull from as you think about your leadership philosophy?
So I'm a good to great
Okay.
Good to Great guy, and I've kind of used that
Very good.
as my Bible. I'm actually, not to get too religious, but I'm reading a book about kind of Christianity as it relates to authentic leadership. Because I think whether people are religious or not, or whatever they believe in or don't, a lot of those qualities, I think, of just being a good person really now more than ever are critical in terms of kind of how you're approaching your daily life. I'm reading Shoe Dog, the Phil Knight. Phil Knight book is just fascinating about his first kind of 15 years in business before it really started hooking. And, he just talked about being an entrepreneur and expectations and how to follow your path regardless of what others might think. And I think he did okay with that. And and then also I'm reading a John McEnroe book. So I was a little bit of a tennis player back in the day.
Really?
So
what's that book?
It's I can't remember the name of it, but it's kind of his, as he became successful in the 70s and 80s, and he had a bit of a tantrum. So it's funny to see folks that kind of went off the rails sometimes and how they kind of brought it back and learned from their mistakes. But he's become a fabulous success in the broadcast booth as well as he was on the court. So those are just a few.
Outstanding. Well, hey, I've enjoyed the conversation. Before we leave, share a little bit about, you talked a little bit about Paradigm, which I'm really, really impressed with the organization and really, really impressed with their business. Anyone that can step into this, I mean, they're pure creativity.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about maybe them and then what you do and how people might get a hold of you if they want to tap into you.
So in my management consulting world, Paradigm is a client, really an amazing organization. They've been around for, I think, 23 years and doing everything from kind of brand positioning to brand experience for clients in St. Louis and around the country and beyond. So they're based in the Central West End in St. Louis, but represent a lot of healthcare, higher education, B2C companies like Panera and Purina, as I mentioned before, financial services organizations. So, but yes, it's, for me, it's been cool because I've been able to, we talked about being present. I've been able to kind of have a level of flexibility since I sold my business to be able to really pick the smartest and best organizations that are not just, they're making money, but they also want to really, really make a difference, not just in the lives of their clients, but in their community. And Paradigm's an organization like that. So you can find them at pnmg.com. I'm available via email at tsetling, so tsetling at gmail.com. For me, it's finding, like, that's why you and I get along so well. I think we have very similar perspectives on, we're here for a short amount of time. Let's make sure you dive in and you're completely passionate about what you're doing and you're lining yourself up with people that you'd go to war with. And I think the folks at Paradigm and the folks that I represent are those kinds of people, just like you are to me as well. So thanks for having me.
Well, thank you. Well, this has been fantastic. I'm Galen Bingham, the Leadership Strategist, and I believe that every success and every failure begins and ends with leadership. And I can't think of a better person to add to our toolbox than Tom Etling. He's done so much, and he's continuing to do so much. And one of the things that I've really been impressed with you is you're able to get in and have impact really, really quickly. You don't waste a whole lot of time making your mark wherever you are. So really, really appreciate that. And as we sign off, I just want to say that I believe that everyone is designed to be the greatest in the world at something. Therefore, your life's mission is to find your thing so that you can get on with being the greatest in the world. And with that, take care. All right, man.